So, having largely learned to play chess primarily online since the pandemic started, I don't really have too much over the board experience, and with that comes an ignorance about some of the unspoken rules of chess or some chess etiquette around things like when to resign and what's considered poor sportsmanship versus what's considered maybe savvy and resilient defense. So, in this video, I have two examples of recent absolute swindles that I've pulled off. I've played absolutely dreadful chess in these games, but I wanted to highlight I absolutely love a swindle. Check out my video on the art of the swindle if you're interested in learning maybe how to do some of those. But also would love to get your thoughts on whether or not this is a little bit scummy or just part and parcel of the game, just good defense. So let's jump on into our first game. Both of these were rapid games in and around the 1800s. Again, I've been on an absolute roller coaster, so you'll see by some of this play, it's probably far from 1800 play, but clinging on in there for the moment. So both of these games also have in common the fact that they are d4 openings. So if you ever want to get me on the ropes, just play 1d4. It's that easy, and I'll be completely at sea. So I've been trying out the King's Indian, and this actually goes okay. We play a pretty decent opening, and again, the opening isn't really what we're here for. Largely trading blows. I'm trying to start maybe a classic kind of King's Indian attack on the king side, but they sort of get some counterplay on the queen side, which I don't deal with in any good way. So we'll see here. There's this whole pawn muckery, jiggery pokery, that largely white comes out massively on top, and there's just like when to take, when not to take with this kind of pawn quartet here. The answer was basically take a lot sooner than I did, rather than just let white take what they want and kind of really shatter my queen side, where all of their pieces are ready to kind of jump on in. So the computer has them at +1 at this stage. Nothing insurmountable, but a distinct advantage for white. That's not the blunder of the day that we're going to see just yet. Again, I try to maybe recover from this and just focus all of my efforts onto the king side, but white is actually pretty solid here, so it's not the best plan in the world, and it all comes a cropper very shortly here, where we try to launch our pawn storm. We just don't have the artillery to crack on through, and all of this positional stuff goes out the window. And again, it's maybe not that much value talking about like all the positional ideas in the opening. If I'm just going to throw away a rook, which I do in the next move, moving this knight away, again just completely forgetting that there's a pin here on the rook. I think I was quite concerned with the pin against the queen, so once I'd solved that problem, I said, hey, there's nothing else behind that rook, or behind that knight I should say. Try to get the knight in for some speculative attacking opportunities here, but we just drop an exchange. So again, we have thrown away this game pretty much, and in the 1800s, where I'm trying to just cling on for dear life, maybe get a foothold, start to make a push for the 1900s, throwing away games like this is killing us. So I was pretty disappointed, but as soon as you do that, as soon as you blunder, you definitely want to take on the mentality of a cornered mouse or rat. Definitely overpowered, definitely outmaterialed, but dangerous all the same. Don't go quiet into that good night. Wriggle around, thrash about, try to spring as many traps as you can, and that's exactly what we do here. So the method of this is just kind of to survive. We're actually not too far down material wise. We did manage to get a pawn back for that exchange, but white is completely infiltrated here. Our pieces are at 6s and 7s. They're not really talking to each other. We don't have a huge amount going on in the counter-attacking form. Essentially, white has me on the ropes here, and I just trying to stay alive, just trying to keep our head above water for the time being, trying to keep any sort of like, maybe little double attacks going on, just making sure that they're, keep it honest, that they don't get laser focused on the goal of checkmating us, making sure that we don't leave any free material on the table, and balance the powers for the time being. So again, this is just a bit of piece shuffling, but when you're in this position, when you're down material and you are kind of maybe looking for these swindling opportunities, some advice I would give: try to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. That's not always going to be possible. If your opponent plays well, they will engineer situations where you can't necessarily you can't avoid simplifying. but hopefully you can do so on your terms, or at least get something for the pieces you're giving away. But generally you want to keep your queen on the board just to cause as much havoc as possible, and as much as possible get your pieces towards the king to launch some sort of attack, speculative or otherwise. But that can leave the door open for other opportunities, which we'll see in just a second. So again, white just trying to turn the screw, not playing particularly accurate either of us, that's fine. But the mentality here is just keep our pieces alive, just coax their way towards the opponent's king. Here's just another blunder. Head is completely gone. We are 7 points, like -7 on the evaluation bar. White is +7 here. So at this stage, looking pretty grim, looking like another loss in the 1800s. But I do see a king exposed, and we do have a queen. I don't really know how we're going to enact anything about that. But I'm not resigning just yet. I'm staying alive. I'm keeping them honest, making them do what they need to do. And basically, as soon as this queen comes off of this diagonal, I'm infiltrating, and I'm just trying to see what I can get cooking. And as soon as they do, you'll notice the eval bar on the left hand side. Can you see that? Yes, the eval bar on the left hand side drops to 0-0, and this is one of your sharpest blades in the fight towards getting a swindle, and that is the perpetual check. So what this getting the queen off of this diagonal and actually sort of hemming their king in here as well, the bishop plays their part. It basically means that the king doesn't have anywhere to go, and this queen is going to need to do everything she can to actually block these checks. But as she blocks those checks every single time, she leaves a window open. When she closes the door, leaves the window open. And every single time, we are just able to shuffle around and keep that king in check. And eventually, we manage to scramble a draw through repetition. So this is another rule. If you're newer to the game, you might not understand this, or might not have come across it yet. Threefold repetition on chess.com servers and in a lot of top level games. If you reach the same exact position on the board 3 times, that's a draw automatically. It's called threefold repetition. It basically means there isn't much more juice to be squeezed from this lemon. The game is going to repeat kind of ad infinitum. And that's where perpetual checks actually gain you those draws. It's the threefold repetition. And that's what we've done here. We've just seen that this window door maneuver that we had going on here. There's no really else for the king to go. And that does leave us open to get a very, very valuable draw, just to stop the rot, stop us losing all these games on the bounce. That's the first game, and I don't actually think there's too much wrong with what we did there. That was all above board. That's just defensive play. Yes, they outplayed us. Yes, we played like an absolute mug and threw away pieces willy-nilly. But everything on the board was... They did leave the door open for us to get this perpetual check going on. This next game, there is a little bit more of a question mark, but I don't think it's actually anything too scummy. But as I mentioned, another D4 game where we just find ourselves completely at sea. The eagle-eyed among you will see that this is some sort of attempt at a Grunfeld defense. Grunfeld defense, it's a cool, trendy new defense that all the grandmasters and super grandmasters are playing. Turns out it's really hard, and you actually need to study it, because I get completely lost here. This e5 move, antithetical to the Grunfeld. Don't even think about it. But yeah, we get completely at sea here, and honestly, like, we don't lose the rag too much, but we are behind. Material wise, not so much, but structure wise, we're in ruins here. Like, where is our king going to live safely? Our queen side hasn't even started developing, and our king side is just Swiss cheese, just holes that you can poke through that. We've decided to castle kingside anyway, and just invite the assault, which does come in the form of their bishop sliding in. We shake our rook on up to get their other bishop on board. And here again, just absolute blindness. We actually make a massive blunder here. I was so concerned about when they push this pawn, that's going to be a discovery on this rook. And I just made an absolute dreadful move. Not this one. So once I was like, okay, well, maybe we'll attack this bishop to get it off this diagonal. Obviously, they can just shuttle back. And then this rook move, complete waste of time, completely overlooked the fact that we could actually just stop that discovery. That didn't happen, that's fine. Also wanted to show you this absolutely bananas configuration that white had. So you'll see that they played a brilliancy. This knight move, taking the e-pawn here. was a brilliancy, because they actually had a way to guarantee to win our queen with this. And you'll see again, this is a sacrifice. We can take that back that knight, and for all they're winning in exchange, that's giving us back some material. So why the computer thinks that this is a brilliancy is for the following reason. So if we take this knight back, claiming some free material, why not? Queen comes in, and notice that this rook is pinned by the bishop. So this is extra pressure on the rook. And if we don't want to lose this rook, there's only a couple of things we can do. We could bring the bishop out and just lose that straight away. Or we can add another defender to the rook via the queen. And then what happens here is the queen comes in to f6, which is threatening checkmate here. And again, rook is still pinned to the king. So the only real way is to, again, throw in a quick spite block with our bishop. Block there, queen takes, and queen can take the queen there. So we're down a queen at that stage. So 7 points of material. So that was that crazy maneuver. However, however, our opponent didn't actually find all of this. So let's go back to, let's go back here. So after this knight move, rather than finding that brilliant continuation we just covered off, they actually just cash in their chips then. That's when they take the exchange, having given us a knight of free material. And there are still some chicanery going on here with the queen, but we have enough to block everything between the queen and the bishop. So we haven't actually thrown the game away here yet, which is great. They've let us out of jail for free. But thankfully, from White's perspective, we put ourselves right back in jail like a very obedient prisoner. And we move this knight, blundering a rook, blundering a full rook here. This, of course, is check, and we can only really kind of block this or jump back to the next row, which we're not going to do. So we actually just need to block that and give away our rook. So that is actually, again, another one of the critical blunders that we've committed in this game. And again, we get into that trapped rat mentality. Let's keep some of our pieces on the board. Let's cause a little bit of havoc. Maybe go for the king's throat while we still have a couple of moves to survive. No massive like technique here. It's just basically like looking for any sort of checks, looking for any sort of forks, any sort of cheap, cheesy tactical tricks, anything that you can find to basically get your opponent to slip up. And again, here we get 1 pawn back, so we're only down 4 points of material, and we get all of our pieces nicely globbed around the king. Again, with perfect play, or even with a decent play, White wins here comfortably. That's not the point. The point isn't to play the perfect, like, least losing move. The point is to create chaos and maybe unsettle your human opponent, who isn't going to calculate all these computer lines and know why all these speculative ideas don't work. So that's what we're aiming for here. We attack the rook. We drop the bishop back. This was just some flimsy thinking by me. Again, kind of counter to all of my advice about keeping pieces on the board. I thought this was a cheap trick to basically lure the queen into taking this bishop, and then if they did, that we could then pop our queen in there with unstoppable mate. That's absolute false. The king can just continue walking on here. So the queen takes the bishop for free. We try our dinky little maneuver. It of course doesn't work because the king has an ample amount of squares to run to. And again, we just sort of shuffle, just trying to keep alive. But we are 7 points of material and 9 points down on the eval bar. But look, we are still alive. The clocks are still ticking. The fat lady has not sung just yet. Pick up another pawn. Always nice. Always nice to get a pawn for free. Closing out the king. And again, at this stage, we do give up an exchange here. But I, at this point, thought that we actually had a perpetual check. I thought that the king, not perpetual, but we had a nice little go of it. We had a nice few ways to keep the king in check. And that's exactly what we try to do. We just try to navigate around and hope for a slip up, trying to level as many checks. Again, this could be seen as spite checking, which is why I'm not sure if this is like bad, scummy play, because I wasn't sure if there was a perpetual check here. But I was like, hey, this is all we have. Material wise, we should really go for, I mean, like, we would be well within our rights to resign here at this stage, but that's no fun. And I was trying to not drop out of the 1800s again. So at this stage, we actually did manage to earn ourselves a perpetual check, But another thing I wanted to add, and again, on the topic of you don't have to play perfectly. I didn't know this. This is really hard to calculate. Like, where are these perpetual checks coming from? Where can't the king go that we could just keep on forever checking him? And I don't get it right. It's similar to our opponent missing that madness of a sequence earlier on with the knight. The computer is an absolute joke at chess. There's like, don't feel bad if you miss some computer ideas. But my idea here was just to keep checking the king. And at this stage, we already lost our perpetual. But the opponent needs to figure that out. The opponent needs to know where those perpetuals are going to come from. So just keep leveling checks. And with a board wide open like this, with a queen and a king in open field, there's going to be checks for a long time. So I was looking at the king or the computer eval. Even still, there are ways in which white can avoid this perpetual check. But it kind of involves, like, I think it was getting the king around like this area, or maybe even, sorry, this area, and just having the queen kind of shoulder our queen, and eventually they run out of checks. That again is not what happened, and ultimately we just managed to have this same position 3 times in a row. So wasn't a perfectly executed perpetual check. White had plenty of ways out of it by just a little bit more accurate play, but again, an absolutely crucial half point. And I think we picked up a couple of rating points in this game instead of plummeting, 6 to 8 points. So these are some of the most satisfying results that you can get in chess. They do have just sort of like a scummy feel to them. I don't know why. I think it's because I feel like I've been outplayed, played off the board, played like an absolute mug, but through some freak chance, I've managed to stave off defeat. And that's maybe what feels a little less pure for me. However, I'm going to still try this every single game where I blunder or I play poorly. Just wriggle around like that rat in the corner and just go for the throat. Trapped mouse is a dangerous opponent, as they say. Don't think that's the phrase. That's the sentiment I'm trying to get across here. So, swindling. Is it scummy or savvy? You decide and let me know. All the very best.